We have Feudum, the Septennial edition, because this is the 7th anniversary of the game, and this is a giant competitive area control and guild control game where you're going to be placing out units out on a board in order to gain influence over different areas. But the cool thing about this is that as you're placing those influence markers out, you also get to choose which side of that marker is face up, which is going to dictate which of the guilds you're going to be gaining influence over. The game plays over 5 eras, which are each triggered by the actions of the players. And one thing I do want to say about this is that this is a large game that has a ton of rules, a ton of components, and it can be a little fiddly. But if you are not adverse to that, this is a game that a lot of people like. And I know this is probably the pick of the week of one of my really good friends because I know this is her favorite game of all time. And with all that being said, I'll try to explain the game in just a few minutes here, but if you want to know the actual rules, just make sure that you have your drinks and food ordered in advance. But this is a game that plays over a series of rounds, and each player is going to have 11 action cards that they're going to be using to perform the various actions in the game. Every round, you're going to be choosing 4 of those to play, and then after those 4 cards are chosen, players are going to be playing 1 card in turn order. You can use a card to pay resources in order to deploy one of your units out on the board, and like I said, you can choose which of the faces that you want on the top, which is going to influence which guilds you have control over. And if you want to move your units, there is a card for that as well, and it'll allow you to move your units through land, air, or sea, but you need to meet the requirements and have access to the proper vessel in order to do so. You can add an influence marker to one of the areas where you currently have a unit, and the player that has the most in a location is going to be the ruler of that location, which will grant them with a bunch of different benefits. And if you feel like you've secured that location well enough, you can also upgrade a location to swap its token for a better one. And this is where the name comes from, because the best and final upgrade you can get is the Feudum. And this is going to give you all sorts of special benefits, but in order to get full advantage of it, it also requires you to engage in a certain amount of conflict each and every round. If you're not able to meet that quota, you can actually lose victory points. When it comes to battle, there's also cards that you can play in order to boost your attack or defense. And then there's also a card that you can play in order to gain additional cards, which could be upgrades or bonuses or end game scoring. There's also an action that gains you money or resources, or an action to use a guild power. And whenever you do that, you'll be able to trade with any of the guilds out on the board. And each of these guilds do work very different from each other, but a really interesting aspect with these guilds is that each one can also interact with the guild that's adjacent to them. And the different guilds could offer you different resources or allow you to spend resources in order to make wine or gain additional influence markers, or even recruit various monsters offered in the game that you'll be able to deploy and take advantage of to try and defeat your opponents. If you are the one in control of a guild, you can also use an action to manipulate the resources between that guild and its adjacent guilds. And this will allow you to take or give resources depending on your objective at that time. Of course, there's other actions and a ton of other ways to score victory points in this game, and you can even go out on little adventures and things like that. But this new version of the game is going to be upgrading a bunch of aspects of the game with improved graphic design, which was a complaint of this game. And that's just going to make this game a little bit easier to play, which is something that's really great to have, especially when you do have this grandiose of a game. I'm also seeing a lot of reference on the campaign page for a 6th player, but when I go to check the player count, it says 1 to 5. So I think this is going to be adding a 6th player, but it's not really explicitly stated, so it's a little unclear. But there are going to be some rulebook corrections, and of course, a bunch of deluxified components as well. There's a whole What's New section showing off some of these new components and mentions to the 6th player, but I'll just scroll through this and you can check out exactly what it's offering, but that is pretty much the main new additions to the game. And if you're interested to learn more, definitely go ahead and check out the campaign page, but this is one that I would recommend trying to try before you buy if you are able to do so. But like I said, check it out, and if you're interested, you can follow along to get a free gift added to your pledge.